here. I look out in this room and I haven't seen so much interesting, provocative firepower in one room since last Slurp meeting I was in with most of all of you as well.
Right.
So,
That accomplished a lot. Slurp meeting accomplished a lot.
Yeah. We'll do better tonight. Let's see, a couple of brief administrivia. First of all, how about anybody who contributed to preparing for this event, please raise your hand. Yay. And especially, I want to introduce Susie DeLine. So Susie, stand up, Susie.
Stand up.
Everybody applaud. So Susie just recently took over from Annie Lung as the official events chair for Silicon Valley for IAN, which is really great. And she is really good. And she's here. I don't know if you want to say it yourself. But we want all the help we can get from all of you. So anybody who wants to volunteer, or if you have ideas for future events, or if you think you're the right person to speak, whatever, see Susie or any of us. So thank you, Susie.
And before you give up that, I'm going to talk about the next event.
Oh, good. Please.
All right. So, and actually, if I can, I left Intel a while ago, and I hadn't gotten involved with the alumni network until whoever put together the carpool karaoke video. Right? I mean, that was well done. And in fact, it broke through my Facebook feed, and I looked at that and I said, that looks kind of fun. If this group can do something fun like that, yeah, this looks like.
Ursula Herrick, do you want to stand up?
So that was a good time. And in the spirit of having a good time, let me tell you a little bit about the next event on our schedule, in case you want to consider it, invite a friend, invite an enemy. Raise your hand if you ever had a meeting in conference room Pedro's. Right? So Throwback Thursday, December 5th, we are having the holiday networking event at Pedro's, upstairs room, and we are going to do a wait, wait, don't tell me style Intel quiz. Yeah, so we'll have a little more information about it on the Facebook page. We'll send an email, but if that sounds fun, by all means, plan to come, help out. If it sounds awful, send your worst boss that you ever had and tell them, everyone who's anyone will be there.
Good for you, Bill.
All right, well, I will give this to you to turn off. Thank you. I'm going to turn on the Facebook Live.
Oh, yes. So tonight, for the first time ever, we're going to be broadcasting this live across Facebook Live. So, text all of your friends and relatives at home and tell them to watch. So by now you've probably all read about what we're going to do here tonight. I'm really honored to call each of these gentlemen a friend. I've known them both a long time. I'm going to briefly introduce Rob, who, as a part of the program here, he's going to be interviewing Avram, and I'll let him do the real high-power introduction of Avram. So Rob is a partner at Exceed Capital in Portola Valley. So if you're down in Portola Valley, stop by his office. He has done venture investing for quite some time, and it really goes all the way back to what was formerly known as CBD, Corporate Business Development, the precursor to Intel Capital, where Avram hired Rob back in the day. I think, if I'm quoting Rob correctly, his real pride and joy is teaching at Stanford GSB now. He teaches a variety of classes. I think, do you teach or co-teach the follow-on to Andy's class? Is it?
Yeah, so the evolution with Robert Berlin, we've been doing together now for about 15 years.
Great, fabulous. Yes, and I know Rob is he's a Cal grad and a Stanford MBA, teaches at Stanford, but still lives and breathes blue and gold, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I wear blue and gold at big game, even in our Stanford football games.
Very good. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob to interview and introduce Avram. Thank you.
Bruce. Good evening.
Good evening, Rob.
Thank you, Michael. Make sure you behave yourself.
Oh, hell no.
My two bosses are here from
I'm
Intel.
waiting.
This is terrifying.
A VC interviewing a VC, it's like, come on.
Really. So, it's a little known fact, if I remember correctly, you were actually in the Merchant Marine before you joined Intel, is that right?
Well, way before I joined.
Okay, and then you were also, if I remember, you were the CEO of Franklin, who made the only Apple II clone ever.
Right.
And then you went to Intel, where you had an illustrious career setting up both CBD and Intel Capital. You invested in companies like CMGI and DCCW, amongst others. Since you left, you've started the Avram Miller Company, which you do a lot of consulting, and you've got a great blog, 2/3 done. So thank you very much for making the time to be here tonight. It's a little known fact, I actually went to work for Avram 25 years ago last month. Do you remember when we met?
Yeah, we were on an airplane. I was trying to get you to buy me a drink.
That's right, we got drunk together on a flight coming home from CES in January of 1992. I had hair. So tell us a bit, how did you end up at Intel, and in particular, how did you end up going to Intel and then doing corporate development?
I joined Intel in 1984, so that was, what is that, 35 years ago?
Exactly.
And I was a child. I was out of work. I had left a pretty good job at Digital Equipment Corporation, where I ran a big project, and joined Franklin, which was a startup doing an Apple clone. And we were sued by Apple, and we had some problems, and I didn't have any work after that, and then I got a call from Les's office. Les was interested in meeting me, and I had discovered that the law company that represented Apple in the suit was the same one that represented Intel. So I thought, that's a good thing, I'm gonna go to the right side. Because Intel was right, and then it had some problems with AMD. But anyway, it was funny because I just asked Les. On Thursday, I met with Les, we meet often, we're still close. And it was Les's 83rd birthday. By the way, I was 39 when I joined Intel, and Les was 48. And I said to him, "Why did you hire me?" No, but that would have been a good answer. And because it was always strange to me that he actually hired me. But he said, Intel was so insular, and it got so insular, and he felt like he needed somebody he could talk to. And he wanted to try, and so he took a chance on me, and I took a chance on Intel, but I asked to see the strategic long-range plan of the company. And I sat, and he said, "Okay, you can read this thing, but you can't take it with you." And I sat in the conference room and I read it, and the first page said, "Change is our ally. Change is good for us." So I thought, well, that's good, because that's what I do. I like to change things.
And so, what were you doing in the early days of corporate development? Was it called CBD in those days?
No, that happened much later. I was what was called a strategic hire. Les had come up with Les was running the strategic stuff. I think, Mike, you were working for Les then. Or you?
We look alike.
Yeah.
Who was doing CAD?
One of us is smart.
I was doing CAD, he was doing CAD.
I was doing CAD. I worked, Les hired me, I worked for Les.
And then Les gave CAD to Palace, and then I worked for.
Okay,
Same
so
thing.
I mixed up because
Well,
I still don't know what CAD is, but but anyway, Les had this strategic staff, which was a bunch of cats and dogs, I think the best way to describe it. And so he got permission to make a strategic hire, which is, somebody that you want to hire, but you don't know what they're supposed to do. So, and that was me, and he said, "You can do whatever you want to do." So I went up to live in Oregon because I couldn't afford Silicon Valley. And then there was a systems group up in Oregon under Bill Lattin. So I started trying to help Bill, and I discovered that there was a project going on with Siemens called Gemini. And we don't have enough time to talk about that.
We don't want the whole evening to be a downer either.
But it was a mess, and I felt like I had to volunteer to help this was a project to build kind of the most advanced computer system in the world. So advanced that instead of having 32 bits, I had 33 bits.
Seriously. It went to 11.
And I spent 3.5 years doing that. And after that, I said that I wanted to move to Santa Clara because I figured that was where I really needed to be. And I wanted to do business development, which meant I just didn't want to deal with Intel people. So I was relocated, and I started working on mergers and acquisitions.
Okay, so M&A first.
Yeah, and that turned out to be a real disaster because Intel's culture was so strong that the antibodies would come out and attack the foreign object, and so after. I really wanted to get us in the communications business, really, so that's what I was doing, but I felt we needed people that knew it, try to buy these smaller companies. The bigger companies we couldn't buy either because they were either too expensive or they were too crappy, and so I came up with the idea of doing venture investment because I felt like we wouldn't be able to destroy these companies. We only own the minority of it, and we might be able to get some real insight from working with them. And so it was a different approach. Les supported it. I was working for Les, hired me. I always worked for Les, never worked for anybody else. But Les was running the systems group at that time. And so I started, and the first person who, I think Tim, you may have been the first person, but Greg Mashu, who is someplace there.
Greg is over there.
Was the second person who, I don't know, why in the world would you have joined me? But anyway, he came to work. And slowly we started doing venture investments. There were other people doing it too. Tom Galvin and Galvin.
Yeah.
And people in the were working for the microprocessor group was doing some stuff. It was kind of all over the place, and then eventually Les went on sabbatical. Went to Harvard, stayed there for a while, came back, and Andy said, we're doing all these things. I think we should be doing them, but nobody's managing it. Why don't you come in and manage the process? So he came in. He gave up. He didn't have anything else to do, and so for a while he only had one direct report. It was me.
That was you. Okay.
Yeah, and I think you joined at that point.
I joined in the fall of '94. And so in the early days, you were doing early stage investments, and which is generally anathema to a large corporation because it's the most risky. It's where there's the least understanding of what's going to happen, and most corporations want, if they're going to do investments, conservative and have a path to profitability, which most startups don't have, even in those days. Why did you choose to do early stage investing?
Well, because we weren't a venture capital group, and I asked Les on Thursday. How he felt about it. I asked him a bunch of questions because I wanted to be able to represent his point of view here at this meeting. If it was different than mine, normally it's pretty much the same. But and I think he had two things that he said. One of them I'm kind of paraphrasing to say exactly, but he basically said the one thing he regretted was changing the name from CBD to Intel Capital. And the reason was because we didn't really see ourselves as a venture group. We see ourselves as a business development group, and we had a strategic mission, not a financial mission. And that by making it Intel Capital kind of changed the sense a little bit of what our activity was.
I remember asking us, I think Adobe had started Adobe Capital. I sent him an email, and he sent me a note which basically was NFW, but I don't think he used the acronym.
Yeah.
Use the actual words. But how did you look at balancing the strategic side with the financial return side? And was it because things were going well in the Valley that we kind of got drifted more towards being more like a venture fund? I mean, I remember we passed on Netscape because the browser worked just as well on a 486 versus a Pentium. Why do you think we moved away?
That was the reason, but no, I mean, it happens. I don't think we actually moved away during my time. I left in '99, it's 20 years ago. I don't think we moved away, and I don't know, I've heard rumors about what happened after. I don't really know what happened after. But you know, we had 3 objectives. One I would almost say is a tactic. So the first objective was to grow the market. No, well, we didn't realize these objectives at the beginning. I should tell you, we just were like doing stuff. And then we tried to figure out things as we went along. So it isn't like one day we sat down and we figured out the whole world. We didn't. It took a long time to figure these things out. But eventually we understood that there was 3 missions, or 3 objectives. One was to grow the business for Intel's business, to make the PC business bigger. Because at that time, Intel basically was a microprocessor company dedicated to the PC market. And so if we could grow the market, I remember these discussions because we said, you know, if you grow the market, you grow the market for AMD, which was our competitor. Well, AMD had 15% of the market, let them grow, you know. So could we grow the market? And the biggest example that I was involved in was the development of residential broadband and the internet, consumer internet. Can we grow the market? So that was the one thing, and we did that very well, I think. The second thing is to get a great return for our investment. But what was important about that were 2 things. Les was convinced that you couldn't achieve the strategic objective of where you had a strategic reason for investing in a company. That would not be achieved unless that company was successful. And if it was successful, you would get a return. So it was really, in his mind, he got more and more interested in making sure we would get a good return, and we got more involved with, you know, the financial understanding of the companies and legal and all the rest, more of an integrated approach. So because we wanted the companies that we invested in to be successful for our purposes, the reason we invested in them. But the second reason, I think, actually maybe was even more important, but we didn't articulate it, which was, as long as we made money, people kept off of our ass. You know, we just were free. And if we had not been making money, if we had had to ask for money, then we would have been under a whole different regiment. And I don't think we would have achieved much. The third objective is the objective that I feel, you know, we failed in, but both Les and I would agree with this, which was to have a strategic impact on the company long-term in its strategy and its thinking, its evolution. And we thought if we talked to all these companies and we learned, you know, these companies would, and this is why, back to your question, you want to be dealing with companies that are very early because they have the perspective of what might happen in, let's say, 5 years. That's what's driving them, as opposed to somebody who's really in the business. And that's what we were seeking. That's what we had an appetite for. We wanted to understand what does the future look like. And we did understand a lot of that from that, but it was impossible to get Intel to move because it was so successful doing what it was going to do. We just wanted to keep doing it and doing it better. And I used to be, maybe some of you probably heard this, but I used to say when I first joined Intel, it was selling silicon by the ton. It was in the memory business. And then it discovered a vein of gold, and that was the microprocessor. And I used to say, you know, when you extract all the gold out of the vein, where are you? You're in a big fucking hole. And so that's what, you know, kind of happened. So we wanted, I think, to broaden the company, the perspective. And I think about this all the time, and I think Les does too, which is, you know, what could we have done differently? And because I think it was important, and I think that really was our mission.
All right, so what would you tell yourself, it was 94, 95, 96, what would you tell the Avram Miller of those days to do differently in order to potentially have success in that third area?
You know, I don't know if it was possible. You know, I used to, for a long time, I used to ask myself, what could I have done differently? I mean, seriously, you know, with deep probing into myself and thinking about this, because this was the most important thing I did in my life. But you know, it has to come from the top. And Andy, with all his greatness, got stuck and wasn't really able to look beyond this. And I don't know how you could have done it. So and sometimes I think, you know, could I have helped, made him understand better? What could I have done to? I don't know. I go through this all the time, but bottom line, I've come to the conclusion that you can't. and that, you know, once it stops at the top level, you can't from the bottom reignite it. It's sad to say.
All right, so let's look at an area that actually I think the organization did do decently well. Can you talk a bit about the returns under your watch and what they were there? What can you share?
Well, so I don't know what the returns really were because, first of all, I think the returns are distorted by the bubble that we had. So, you know, everybody thought they were geniuses in 1999, you know, because, you know, you could take a kite and take it public, you know, it would float. So we did get good returns, but we got extraordinary returns because of kind of the time we were in. And so I think, you know, you have to be careful about thinking about that because, you know, I've invested in a number of funds over the years, and some funds like, you know, 20 to 1, and some funds, you know, 0 to 0, 0. So, we could have been, you know, we could have invested in all kinds of dog. I mean, we did a good job. I think that I guess the only way you can compare it is, how did we do compared to the other people that were out there doing it? And we did very well. So I guess we'd have to say, you know, we were pretty good. But we had some unfair advantages too. We were inside Intel. We knew a lot of things. And, you know, I used to, I had a good relationship with the press because I was press friendly. And I would go out and kind of give stories to the press that would be of benefit to our portfolio companies. And so that, you know, you couldn't do this at venture, well, maybe some venture capitalists could, but most of them could, you know.
So if you look back, what's your greatest success? If you look back, or the thing of which you're most proud of, either for yourself or for the group in the time that you were there?
Well, I mean, for me, it's, you know, residential broadband, because we went against the popular thinking, which was the TV was going to be it, and everybody, Microsoft, Oracle, Time Warner, all these, you know, people spent billions and billions of dollars trying to put interactivity on the TV, and it failed. In fact, we still don't have it because nobody wants it. Nobody wanted it then, and nobody wants it now. But we came to understand that people wanted personal computers in their homes, and they were buying them, and they would want to also be able to connect, and they would want to connect at high speed. And the thing that I observed and really kind of motivated me was, I called it at the time, home at work, which was not taking your job home. It was staying late at night at the office so you could get some broadband. And so, you know, we mounted this campaign, and it was an amazing experience because going around to the cable companies, which were, you know, they always say they're a bunch of cowboys, but they pretty much are, they were, and trying to explain to them that they weren't in the television business. They were in the communications business. You know, this was not easy. This sounds, you know, like now, you know, Comcast has got the majority of the revenue comes from, you know, broadband, but no, this was a very strange thing, you know. And, you know, we were fortunate, you know, when we started demonstrating it, you know, people started seeing it and whatever, but it was a slow process. It really didn't happen overnight. It was not an overnight success. But we were really, it would happen anyway, and I have to think it would happen anyway. It probably happened earlier because we put Intel's muscle behind it, even though Andy thought it was, you know, BS. You know, but he didn't. You know, most of the time he didn't attack it in public, only sometimes.
So when you think of, you know, what happened in CBD, Intel for 2.5 decades has been one of the most active corporate venture capital arms. What do you think about the role of a corporate venture capital organization inside of a company? Is it generally a good thing or a bad thing, or if it ways to be successful, what are the attributes?
Well, you have to decide what its purpose is. So, some organizations, I can speak. I advise the Cleveland Clinic, and on research, not on venture. And the Cleveland Clinic has a venture group, and that venture group is part of the finance organization, and it's purely financial return. And so is that bad? Or no. I just think it doesn't play the role, and I told them that, it doesn't play the strategic role. It doesn't help the Cleveland Clinic achieve its strategic goals, which are patient first. That's at least their objective. But I have no problem with the notion of the company saying, we've got a lot of money, or we want to invest, or why are we paying 20% to these guys? We could do it. I think by and large they won't do as good a job as if they had invested in venture funds, themselves. Then you get the ones that are sort of they're not sure. It's strategic, but we want to get a good return. But I look at a couple things. I look, who does this organization report to? Okay, and if it reports to the finance organization, I know what it is. Okay. Second, I say, how are the people compensated? If the people that are in the venture group are compensated on, like a carried interest model, then I know what it is. It's a captive venture capital group. It's not a strategic group. One of the things that Les and I were, we discussed this again on Thursday, we wanted the group to be compensated like everybody at Intel. We didn't want, we couldn't imagine how would these people that worked for us be able to work with these other groups and get access to, say, Intel Architectural Labs and all the rest, when they're going to make millions and these other people are going to make, very little from whatever this activity is. So we never did that, and it caused a lot of turnover. But you couldn't have it both ways. You create somebody who's pretty good at venture capital, and they can go and make a lot of money, and you can't give it to them; they're going to leave. So you have to then, in that case, develop a system, knowing that people are going to come and go. And unfortunately, some of the key people could stay because we were there long enough that we had a lot of stock, and so we were being compensated. Maybe not as high as the venture capitalists, but we can't say that we were taken care of. So. I think that, and you can't generalize and make corporations because people are making every kind of thing and whatever, it's kind of corporate. But I think that for many companies, and certainly technology companies, but not all the technology companies, or pharmaceutical companies or whatever, if I was designing a company, I would have a corporate development group like we had at CBD. And I would have an architecture group like we had in Oregon under Ron. But I would have them probably work for the same person.
A couple of final questions, and then we're going to open up to all of you to ask questions. You talked about the process of people turning over, working through the system. What other systems or methodologies did you and Les put in to CBD and Intel Capital that you think are worth highlighting, that you look back on and say, wow, that worked, and also maybe anything that didn't work so well?
Yeah, no, it was really good because, first of all, we had such a great partnership because Les was more organized than me, and he was interested in process, and we kept trying to think about, what goes wrong in these things. So we developed, and how do we enable people as we grew? How can we enable people to go out and deal with these small companies, which we consider to be very fragile, and not, disrupt them too much? And how could they speak for us? So we had something called the Deal Concept Meeting, which we call DCM, and where somebody would come and basically propose, hey, we found this company and we're really interested in doing this with them, and this is and we would sort of give marching orders about it. This worth pursuing, and we probably wouldn't want to invest more than you have to tell me.
The DCMs were my fault because of all these crazy deals that I did. They still have them today. When I meet people from Intel Capital, I have to apologize. The DCMs and IPAs were my fault.
Yeah. So. And then we had the IPAs, which were the investment program approval, and which was kind of the final approval. And we developed the idea that we would get finance, the finance organization, and the legal organization involved right from the beginning. And we only have people from legal here, but I don't see anybody that was involved in finance. And we would, and it was more or less, I wouldn't say they were kind of they could veto something, but they were not there to, they would approve something, but they were there to make sure we didn't do something stupid. And we didn't, by and large, we didn't do stupid things. We didn't have lots of problems. We didn't have a lot of legal problems. We didn't have. The other thing that happened is that we really, were sensitive about how we would deal with these companies and making sure that we just didn't, screw them over. And many times we did. We would get into, too many people at Intel would want to get involved in something, and a little company has got to do its thing, and we'd like send 30 people. We once almost bought a company called Apricot in the UK, and we went there, and they actually threw us out. And when the CEO threw us out, he said, "You know what your people are doing here? No, they're digging up my parking lot.
Drilling.
Look,
We're drilling in the parking lot.
drilling in the parking
They called
lot.
me up too.
Yeah, drilling in the parking lot, looking for pollutants and things like this." Was the company? I didn't even know who these people were. They showed up. So, we had to kind of protect them, but we also saw some value in getting them together, and so we started doing, meeting once a year where we would bring the CEOs of these different companies together. That was a really good thing. I think a lot of people have done that since, and we would also try to get some of the Intel executives involved and get them to try to understand and have them speak and so on. I think those were good things.
All right, last question before I open it up to them. How are you spending your days now? Since you've left Intel, what have you done, and then in particular bring us to today?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure it out. Like most people who retire, I start the day having nothing to do. At the end of the day, I only get half of it done. I was trying to, I didn't really want to do it. I mean, I kind of got bored, and I got tired of the ups and downs. You get involved, and we have this, gold rush kind of thing, and everybody is amazing, and everybody's smart, and everybody thinks that they're the greatest, and then the market crashes, and everybody's miserable, and you got all these problems, and then you go through it again. So I had tired of the cycles, and but I was advising a lot of companies, especially, and also when I went to live in Israel, because I couldn't say no. I mean, how could I say no when somebody met me at a party and said, can you come and spend a little bit of time? It still happens to me, and so I decided I'm going to write a book so I can tell people I can't. I'm writing a book.
When will the book be out?
So the book is, there's 3 pieces to the book.
Are you 2/3 done?
Yeah. There's 3 pieces to the book, but there might be 3 books. I don't know, right? Because I've written 440 pages of the first part. But the first part is my own crazy journey through life. As you mentioned, I was a merchant seaman, I was a jazz pianist. None of it makes sense. But I happened to have a chance to meet some incredible people along the way, and I have some good stories to share and perspective of all this. And also, I'd like to inspire people to do it. Not everybody can do it the normal way. I couldn't. I was incapable of doing it the normal way. I had to find my own way, and I'm not the only person like that. So I want to give some inspiration to people like that. The second part is analysis of some of the key events that happened in the computer industry, where I know something, or I may know something, but I'm not playing a part in it that much, but I have a perspective, and I want to share my perspective. And the third thing are the lessons that I learned, and I want to try to get the lessons down like on 1 page. So an example would be, for you, is venture capitalists and entrepreneurs are not on the same page, but the job of the venture capitalist is to convince the entrepreneur they are.
All right, let me open up to any of you have questions. Yes.
So, Intel, I think most of this, my memory serves correctly, happened during the Barrett. Barrett was CEO of the whole creosote Bush analogy, right? But Intel tried a couple of non-CPU strategic moves. One of them is the networking. We bought a bunch of companies, and even optical.
Yeah.
Another big one is the whole new business group with the data centers and everything.
Yeah.
and none of it ended up panning out.
Right.
Or really turning the ship. And did you see any commonalities there?
Well, first of all, I decided to leave the company when Barrett was made CEO. And so that was the end of it for me, and the way, we're amongst friends, right? So, the way,
on Facebook, all 3 million people watching.
That's okay. They're my friends too. They're my friends too. But I truly loved Andy, but I have issues with Andy, but I used to, and I didn't have that affection for Barrett. But I used to say the difference between Andy and Craig is that Andy wanted the same old ideas from the same old people, and Craig wanted new ideas from the same old people. And so, it was, crazy. I mean, Barrett in 1998, I think it was, appointed Jerry Parker, who was one of the most brilliant manufacturing people in the world. He made him head of new business development. You don't know anything about that?
Yeah.
So, I can only talk about the period before I left, which was April of '99. And, I don't know what happened until after that. I saw a succession of CEOs. I knew most of them. But I moved on. And, the company obviously has done well, but has not done great. It was a great company. In my opinion, it's not a great company now.
Question in the back.
Hi, Avram.
Hi.
For a lot of people, myself included, leaving Intel was kind of bittersweet. Can you talk about your departure? Where your brain was at, where you were going, and so forth?
Well, no, but for me, it was kind of complicated one. As I had prostate cancer,
I remember.
and I thought once I had that happen, I said, who knows how it's going to work out. So, do I want to spend the next 10 years of my life doing this? No. The second thing was, I did not want to. It's funny. Les asked me this on Thursday. He said, He said, you never seem to want an operating role. And I said, no, I never wanted an operating role, at Intel especially, No, I didn't want one. And so what was I supposed to do? I mean, there was no job for me other than maybe I could have had Les's job eventually. I didn't want to do that. So it was time for me to go. And also, I'd done pretty well for Intel, but I didn't know if I could do well for myself. How much of what I was doing was Intel, how much was me? So I wanted to know that, and I wanted to go out and see, can I do it for myself? And I'm happy to say I did it for myself. So, so that was a good thing to know. I needed to know that. I didn't leave in bad terms. I didn't leave. I appreciate Intel, and I offered my help many times to whoever was running the company. Nobody took me up on that, but anyway, I did offer it.
Pat, you had your hand up earlier.
Well, I only had my hand up in contrast to that question that was asked because when I arrived at Intel in 1994 in the fall, somewhere within the first 15 months, the first thing I did was sell Altera shares. And I'm assuming that you were responsible for buying Altera shares, a minority investment in Altera. And then later in 2015 or whatever, Intel bought Altera, which seems to have been one of the acquisitions that has kind of worked out for them.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if
I
you
didn't
have
do
any
Altera. I didn't do
long-term.
it. After I was there for a while, and everybody that worked in CBD, I worked for Les, and everybody that worked for CBD worked for me. But Les, started looking at this thing and saying, we need to do a lot more for the company, and I was not interested in doing those things. So we started hiring a number of other people, and then we started, so I wasn't, I guess I had the largest group, but there was a lot of other people started coming in and doing stuff.
So that was not you.
No.
Fine.
Hand right there, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, so as a venture capitalist, you have some hypotheses and investment principles, and I'm interested in, what you think was productive and what didn't work during your tenure.
So There are a lot of different philosophies about investing in venture. Okay? So you've probably heard one where I don't invest in an idea, I invest in a team. Okay, you know, I was never like that because I can't figure out what's a good team particularly. You know, so I invested in neighborhoods. I tried to find out where there were areas that I thought were really going to take off, and then invest in a number of companies in those areas. But you know, the thing about, I think you have to, so the most important thing about anything we're talking about is being lucky. The second most important thing is not mistaking luck for being smart. So we, you know, were in a good time, and we were in the right place, and we were in the right neighborhood. So I go back to this neighborhood thing, and so, but there were some thoughts that we had. So when we started investing, let's say, in broadband, you know, you realize, if you come from the technology industry, you realize that things build on top of things. You know, you can't go to the end to start with because the end needs 5 other things to happen first. So, you know, this is something you know, but most venture capitalists, you know, may not even know that. They might not know that. So we would invest in the early parts of something, the foundational technologies that would be needed. And those people would help us, they would inform us, they would teach us, where else should we go? And so we would build up our whole understanding of what to do, a lot out of our portfolio companies, and in a pretty systematic way. So I would say that gave us a higher return than most. I would advocate doing that if you have a large enough portfolio. You know, so you can't, you know, some things you can't do if you don't have enough money to do them. You know, we ended up, you know, with, you know, billions of dollars invested. So that, you know, so somebody who's got a fund of $200 million, they'd have to do a different strategy.
We have time for one more question, and I'm going to take the final one. But is there anybody else who wants to ask Avram anything? Yes.
I want to commend you for having an alternative path, and that you're going to write about that, because I think it's really necessary for young people to understand that there's not just one path, because I think we've become I think the youth in our country is pretty one-dimensional, and they feel like if they don't make it onto that path, they're not going to be successful, and I think it's really cool that you're a very successful man, and you've had an alternative path, and I really like that. And I also, one other question would be, in terms of like personal investing, the way you said you'll invest in sort of a neighborhood, do you believe that's a good approach for individuals too?
I think that individuals should not invest in venture.
No, but I mean, in terms of like, as a venture capitalist, you said, I would invest in a neighborhood, so meaning I'll encompass like an area, instead of just investing in one company, they're all invested.
You mean generally invest in like public stocks and so on? I don't know. I don't own public stocks. You know, I can't really.
I know your philosophy is more what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like the neighborhood philosophy. I've never heard that before.
I think that if you have insight, and so if you have insight into, okay, so what would be a neighborhood to invest in? Okay, well, food. No, food. You know, that would be, because we're going to have a lot of issues around food technology. So if I was going to go out, so I mean, if I was a different person at a different time of my life, whatever, and somebody gave me, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars to invest, I would probably look at food. And I try to understand the architecture of food and all the people that are playing in food and what time to do what and how many. So, you know, there's a way to approach all these things, but the average person, as an investor, you know, I was a professional. I can't be a professional investor of my own money now, because it just would take all my time. You know, I have to hire professionals to manage my money, even though I may know more than they know. But they have more time than I was.
And so Matthew, you want to sneak in one last one?
Quick 3 comments. Avram, I know we need to wrap up soon because there's a Trump fundraiser going on.
Right.
You've got to get to that, right? Okay.
In addition to your enormous strategic accomplishments and how much you educated all of us in your tenure at Intel, I also want to pay specific tribute to your humor.
Oh, thank you.
You made every day very fun, and I don't think I've ever laughed so hard. The juxtaposition of your culture and approach in life to other people at Intel was dramatic, and you made every day fun.
Yeah,
Thank you.
well, thank you. And now, maybe one thing, all those of you that were involved in CBD, could you just raise your hands if you can see? Thank you. Well, thank you.
All right, so before I get to my last question, you know, I have the privilege of teaching corporate venture capital as part of my finance course, and I think that people may not realize the impact that Intel had through CBD and then ultimately Intel Capital for 25 years, and that goes back to the work that you and Les did. It's actually pretty incredible when you look at the numbers over the years, and then Intel stayed committed to it, and that goes back to the two of you from the start. I would highlight that of all the people I had the privilege of working for, including Mike, who's sitting right here, Avram always wrote the best reviews. That you would always think that he has no idea what I'm doing and isn't paying attention, right? He said that he isn't organized. He would write the most insightful, detailed reviews I ever got in my career.
I wrote them.
Oh, and third, coming and building on something that Matthew said, Andy used to call them the wild ducks, right? The people in a company who kind of fly differently. And Avram's, to me, always been the archetype of a wild duck. And somebody who could be successful in a large corporation by pushing a company into its zone of discomfort. And I remember he taught me, I was going to work for Mike, and he said, why in the world would you want to go to work in a business unit, right? That job sucks, right? You've got to deal with reviews and people, and it's awful. And I was like, I have to go cut my teeth on it. And I think it was one of the things that I had to do, that I had to go learn. But truth be told, you were right. Being an individual contributor was way more fun, going back to Matthew's comment. Which gets to my final question. You know, Deborah has highlighted, you know, your better half has highlighted that people like Matthew and Sriram and I, that we were your Intel babies. Yeah. But I want to know which one of us was your favorite.
Not here tonight.
Sriram. All right. Avram, thank you so much for making the time. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Avram.